Space, the final frontier. Space Station Ashland sits on the edge of Federation space with its companion ship, the USS Dalamis Christian. The space around them is full of mystery and strange wonders, where secrets are kept and danger lurks around every corner. The crew of the Dalamis Christian must navigate treacherous waters as they work to protect the Federation. But as they peer into the unknown, they will discover that the line between friend and foe is not always clear. They will be tested like never before and will face challenges that will push them to their limits. Join us on this adventure as we explore the farthest reaches of space and uncover the hidden truths that lie within the shadows. Tabletop Journeys presents Star Trek Preservations. Last time on Star Trek Preservations.
There was no sign of current active civilization, no sign of the parasites. We didn't bring back anything hostile.
These artifacts, we didn't find an awful lot there is the thing, but there is a civilization that was on Tethys hundreds of thousands of years ago, and these artifacts, they seem to tie to them.
Reporting as ordered, Captain.
Please have a seat. And the first thing you notice is that emotionally emanating off of Tobor is seething rage.
My first question is concerning the tapestry. But you mentioned that there's a bright blue-eyed figure with some figures around him.
Correct. Tanari, you haven't seen these yet, but again, you walk into the science office and you basically see, at this point, what's probably several open crates with various artifacts strewn on tables and science personnel scanning them in with, like, hand scanners and stuff like that.
We found these three in particular who had apparently this sort of blue orb eye effect. We didn't have any context for it at the time. They went to Starfleet Medical, and this is Lieutenant Tanari down in the science lab. Lieutenant Narilla and I have something we'd like you to take a look at, and quite possibly Lieutenant Najar as well. There may be a connection between what happened at Tethys and what happened on the Breen asteroid.
Really?
We pick up Act 2. This is a long journey from point A to point B, and a bunch of lore has been dropped, and as you are ruminating over that, for funsies Act 2 tonight, we're going to give you all some interesting creative B-plot that is happening over the course of the ship. So what I need you all to do, if you guys remember from the very first episode, the fun roll table that I derived at that point, I'm going to ask you all please to roll 2 d20s and a d6. Because depending on what choice you get with your 2d20s, your d6 will have importance. And basically what I will give you when you roll your 2d20s and we go around, you will get 2 choices of types of prompts that you receive, and you will tell me what choice you would like, and then that's the prompt that you get. And if you're familiar with any of the collaborative role-building stuff that we did, basically it'll be a prompt that you get to decide some angle of your character or some angle of the world that you live in, that something has happened to you or around you or whatever, and this time they'll have real-world mechanical influence in the rest of the game. So, Tanari, let's start with you, your 2d20s, and keep your d6 for now. I don't need to know what it is just yet.
A 15 and a 19.
Okay, those are very high rolls.
I still think I'm playing D&D.
Your choice is between a message that you have received via communication relay or something to do with a task that you've been performing on the ship.
Let's go with the message.
Go with the message. Okay, so you receive a message from a friend, family member, or colleague talking about a significant change to where you grew up. And I don't just mean like the planet, like down to the nitty-gritty, like within the city, village, street corner, something like that, something about where you grew up. What is the change, and why is it important to you that has changed?
All right. Tanari actually grew up on a starship, a mining starship. So the message is, my father is retiring as captain.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more.
After decades of captaining the ship, they are in the process of choosing a new captain. And I'd put in my background, my family was not necessarily all that supportive of me joining Starfleet.
Sure, yeah.
And so there is some subtle or not subtle pressure or a hint that this may be a time that I should probably return back to the barn.
I'm sure that message said something like, so you want to come take over the ship after I retire, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah, or come back, support your family in this time of change.
Mm-hmm,
Especially when, say, your sister takes over as captain.
Excellent. I love it. What did you roll on your D6?
I rolled a 4.
Okay, excellent. Thankfully, nothing bad, nothing good happens on your 4, but your father is now retiring from his mining spaceship. All right, Ocean, let's go with you. Your 2d20s, please.
18 and a 6.
Okay, so your choice between 18 and 6 is something to do with a task or a dream that you had.
Wow. So Ocean just got back in touch with his father.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with the dream.
Fit the dream. Oh, perfect. Okay. So it's actually not specifically a dream, but you find yourself unable to sleep because you are consumed with the details of something that you're working on. You use the time to make a significant breakthrough. However, it was all a dream. What is the project? Does your breakthrough work now that you are awake? If you're able to remember it. And if you'd like to think about that, I can go ahead and come back to you.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure it would work. But I have a dream of a time with my mother investigating a spider web that was there. And there was something that was caught in it. And I was fascinated by it at the time. And the dream is me remembering my mother explaining to me how the spider realized that something was entangled in its web. That the fibers would send a message to the actual spider regardless of where it was on the web. So, And I'm thinking about it, and a thought occurs to me based on some of the things that people have been figuring out about the Epsilon race. So before I wake up, the fly turns into one of those little squid things, and the spider turns into something bigger and nebulous, but it's looking at me with blue eyes.
Interesting.
I have been developing a theory.
I do love your theories.
Yes.
What did you roll on your D6?
I did not. D6 or a challenge die?
A challenge die.
Okay.
Yep.
I got a 1.
You got a 1. Fabulous. So for the rest of the session, you have a 1-point reduction in the challenge rating on a task if you can relate it to your dream. Okay. Mr. Najjar, your 2d20s, please.
I've got an 8 and a 19.
An 8 and a 19. You have your choice between something to do with a project that you are working on or a message that you receive.
Project that I'm working on.
You have been playing a turn-based tactical simulation overlay game with a member of the Michael Collins. Who are you playing with? And role in the ship or something like that is perfectly fine. What is the scenario and how is your performance?
Okay. So we're playing a computerized tactical overlay of a terraforming strategy game, a cross between the tabletop game Terraforming Mars and like StarCraft.
I like it. Yep.
And we're playing through a scenario where we each land a colony on a planet with an unknown hostile race and have to try to build up the colony, advance its resources. Basically, we're playing Civ against each other, but Star Trek style. And I'm doing reasonably well, but I expected to be doing better than I am. Like, my opponent has surprised me with how well they've managed their resources and figured out which levers to pull, because that's what every game is, figuring out which levers are the most important. And he's been pulling ahead, and I can't completely figure out why, and it's been frustrating me.
Who are they on the Michael Collins? What role do they fill?
It's the Chief Security Officer of the Michael Collins.
The Chief Security Officer. Okay, yep.
And I didn't want to throw out a name in case that person was already named, because I wasn't positive.
Yep, totally fine. Roll your D6, please.
My D6 is a 2.
Your D6 is a 2. No benefit for 2. Okay, so Neela, we are up to you now. What are your 2d20 rolls?
18 and 3.
Okay, so your choices are a task, something to do with a task that you're performing, or a message that you receive.
Let's go with a task.
Okay, a task. Let's see. Okay, an experiment or research project that you're running has gone awry in a fairly spectacular way. What was the experiment? What happened to cause it go awry? And what's the fallout?
I think maybe I was trying to grow a sort of bacteria that I scooped up from a planet, and this bacteria, I'm like feeding it to try to make it a healthy culture, and it grows wildly out of control, causing potential contamination in other parts of the lab, and just a little bit of panic, light panic.
Not serious panic, just like moderate
just
panic.
like a soft little underlying panic. I try to recontain it, but also not kill it completely.
So I'm going to ask a very specific question that I need you to give me an answer to, and just go with
not
whatever
really
way.
Good at specifics.
I know. Is the bacteria that you are trying to grow something that was found on any of the artifacts that have just been brought on the Dilemma's Christian?
Yeah, I think you should go for it.
I like it. I do need you to give me a D6 roll, please. One of your command dice, if you have command dice, or just a regular D6, and tell me what the number is.
1.
I get a 1. Fabulous. So at some point today, in the rest of the session here, you will have a task difficulty increase of 1 point related to the task that you are performing. I reserve that in hold. So in effect, it'll be a 1 difficulty increase on something that you're rolling for. So I will note that. +1 difficulty at my disposal. Appreciate the gift. Okay. Captain Tobor, your 2d20 rolls, please, sir.
A 5 and a 12.
A 5 and a 12. Very mid-of-the-road rolls, sir. I appreciate that. One of them has to do with a project that you are working on. The other one has to do with a dream that you had. Actually, sorry, that's the same dream that Adam had. So I'm going to give you, instead of a dream, a task. Project or a task?
Fine, I'll take the project.
Take the project. Let's see. Oh, this is an easy peasy one. What is the latest holodeck program that you're building, tweaking, and enjoying?
So it's an action-adventure style, essentially Dungeons and Dragons.
I love it.
Like sword and sorcery, complete with holographic spell casting and everything.
Are there costumes involved? Are there
Absolutely.
To what level are we going here?
Yeah, no, it's all the way. And it's a blend of like several different cultures, like medieval. It's like a anthropological study of the very comparative medieval development of civilizations and how they turned out. So there's the elves are actually Vulcans, and the dwarves are actually Tellarites, and so on and so forth.
I like this. Nice. That is quality work. So what is this called, if you have a name for it?
Yeah, History of the Federation.
I like it. All right. And a D6 roll, please, sir. Command I if you have it.
A Delta.
A Delta. On a pip, gain 1 free success on any task while on the holodeck.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone, for indulging a little bit of fun. The next bit begins with a couple of very specific things that are going to happen here, and then, Neela, I will carry on with you in a minute. So I'm going to give you some information and let you stew on it a little bit so you can decide what your next actions are going to be. The first thing is Tanari. You receive a message from one of the engineering contacts that you made on the Faraday last mission. Now, when you guys were talking about Epsilon species and everything that was going on with all of that, he has sent you some security updates that he is recommending you patch into the Dalamas Christians sensor arrays and shield harmonic generators. As you're reading through the information, I would like you please to make a 2 difficulty task to try to read and understand what the engineering officer is suggesting.
All right, so this would probably be reason engineering.
I like reason engineering a whole lot. Yep.
And since we're low on Momentum.
Yeah, we're just getting into the meat and potatoes of the episode here. So.
Yep. I will spend a threat to get an extra dice.
I like it.
Reason engineering is 14. 6, 14, and 6, so 3 successes.
3 successes. Okay, so you spend the 1 threat, and you gain 2. What did I say? 2? I said 2 challenge, right? So
it's a
you
difficulty
gain
2, so we gain 1 momentum.
1 momentum. Fabulous. As you're reading through schematics and the technical information that he's suggesting you implement, you realize that the patches that you've been working on with shield harmonics and the sensor arrays are significantly more sensitive and better equipped than the patches that you're getting. What do you do with this information?
How well do I know the engineering contact over on the Faraday?
You probably met him for the first time a couple of weeks ago. It's not somebody that you've had a prolonged exposure or relationship to or anything?
Run his patches through a simulation, see what happens.
Sure, absolutely. Give me a 1 difficulty task to go ahead and do that in a way that protects it from the rest of the systems.
Okay. That is a 7 and a 20.
Okay, cool. So you get a complication. Fabulous.
Yep.
1 success and a complication. I need you to roll me a naked D6, not a command die if you have it, please. A 5. So as you're trying to go ahead and play them in, there are some yellow alert type level alarms appearing outside of the insulated system that you were trying to use, as if some of the information has leaked into one of the core systems, and it seems of all things to be affecting the structure of the Dolanis Christian. It's like some doors aren't closing properly, stuff like that. Suspect send some engineering teams and they'll be able to go ahead and wrap it up, but that seems to have happened. And so you do not believe that when you ran the simulations that they were as isolated as they needed to be. I see computer security expert Lieutenant Commander Ocean chewing his fingernails to the nub down there. It seems that you tried to run the code in a Docker environment, but unfortunately you ran it in production instead. You were able to back it out before it affected the Dolanis Christian's shields or its sensor arrays, so all the modifications that you put there are still sufficient. However, you were not able to properly isolate your execution.
Okay.
What do you do with that information?
Oh, I am going to not cover my ass. I'm going to report to the captain that we've had some errors pop up, and I'm going to explain exactly what happened.
Okay. Captain Tiller?
We'll save that for the senior staff briefing.
But I will tell them that we're going to have repair crews on it immediately.
So, in effect, Tanari, what this means is that for the next act, you will not be able to use the engineering team to assist on any challenges. They are going to be otherwise occupied dealing with this complication.
Understood.
Fabulous. Did you have any questions or anything, Tanari, or anything else that you wanted to clarify on that?
Just send a message back to the Faraday saying, thank you.
Thanks, but no thanks. Yeah, that's very much...
just thank you for the updates.
Yeah, if this point wasn't made clear, the research that you have been doing and the work that you have been doing has been so exemplary. It's like someone without the 6 months of experience that you've had in this was like, hey, I just made this brand new thing. It's going to be great. And you're like, sorry, we were there like a year ago. Yeah, A for effort. Lieutenant Commander Ocean, you receive a message that is marked urgent and confidential.
So I will take it in my quarters.
When you open it, it is what looks like a receipt for a delivery of denobulin roses sent to someone that you don't know.
Okay. But it's sent urgent and confidential, so my first thought is that this is a message that's in some sort of code. Because even if that's a joke, why would they send it urgent? I will spend some time trying to puzzle out if this is one of my contacts reaching out to me, if they have any actual meaning to me. Maybe they were something that I gave to my wife.
Yeah, I will happily let you roll 2 difficulty task to see if you can ascertain what is going on with this receipt for denobulin roses. So let me know the attribute and discipline that you wish to call.
Yeah,
but it's like an investigation type thing. Yep.
It is an investigation. Now, what's the difference between all the attributes? I'm looking at both control and reason for this kind of thing.
It obviously depends on like the discipline that you're using to ask. I have a handy dandy chart here. Let me send the link in case anybody doesn't have it, because it's really very handy. So like a control command role would be carefully and precisely coordinating a group of subordinates. So it's like control is the way that you're approaching the problem. Command is the thing that you're doing, right? So control, careful, precise, stuff like that, versus reason, which is being considerate, finding a solution in difficult circumstances, thinking through the problem that you're dealing with, but still dealing with the same sort of action. So for example, I'm thinking that this sort of thing would definitely be an insight type role. You're trying to ascertain details in the document that you've been given. And then the question is, what's the rest of the approach? Is it like...
Yeah, so because of the way I'm going about it, I would think that it'd be insight security, because I'm trying to deduce the... all right. So
absolutely agree, yeah. You're trying to go ahead and figure out what the heck is up with this random thing. Yeah.
Gotcha. I rolled a 19 and a 9. So obviously not a critical success. I don't know what the complication range is for this, so you don't have to tell me.
So you didn't succeed on the challenge, but I'm not going to give you a complication because I didn't declare that it was an expanded range, so that's on me. But it did not succeed. There does seem to be...
There is always the GM's option to succeed with a cost.
Yes, that's right. So you will succeed with a cost. Thank you, Tobor. Appreciate that. I will give you the success, but it's not going to be a clean success, Mr. Ocean. You definitely can tell that this is an encrypted message of some sort. Like the file size is wrong for the thing that you got. There are like obvious misspellings in it. And so you can try to decode it, but what would have been a 1 difficulty task to decode it is going to be a 2 difficulty task instead.
Okay.
And you can't use insight. You have to bid a different attribute this time.
Okay, looking at our handy-dandy chart. I can't use reason. Or I can't use insight, you said.
Can't use insight. Yeah, you could use reason, sir. Yeah. Like reason engineering, trying to understand if you say applying, like understanding schematics to understanding how the encryption on this particular message would work, that would be valid.
Okay. I'm just looking at my focuses to see how I would... No, I don't have the focus for this.
Okay. There is also a threat and momentum on the board, so...
There is. How many?
We have 2 momentum right now. And a bunch of threat.
I will take one of the momentum.
Okay.
I rolled 2 5s and a 13. So I have 2 successes.
Okay, 2 successes, which is enough to go ahead and decrypt the message. And so in very Matrix fashion, like the screen like jumbles around a little bit as what is released is actually a series of files that is sent by a contact that you expect to be meeting with at the end of your journey. And it's a dossier of information. Before I go ahead and go any further, how much of this information is publicly known to the rest of the party? All that.
We're going to Soltac for... The commander knows about my father.
Yep.
But the rest of the senior staff would know that we have identified Soltac 4 as one of the destinations of the probe.
Mm-hmm.
And my desire to deal with my father and my daughter, I don't think it's the ship's primary concern right now.
Okay, fair enough then.
So that's, I don't care if the players know. That's
okay. I will give you the information. Just make sure that everybody else understands this is out-of-game information for your characters, so just be aware. In this dossier, what you find is the specific report about the theft that your daughter is currently involved in and who she is protecting. The theft was of a highly experimental weapon prototype that deals with subspace technology. You see a name in that dossier that you are very familiar with if you go back to episode 1 with Bragoff. The other thing that's in this is definitive proof of the connection between the person that your daughter is protecting and the crime syndicate that you are following. Something else in the dossier is something that this contact of yours has deciphered. They are aware that your daughter goes to visit your father at the same time every day. And while they don't know exactly the origin, there is an assassination attempt feared, and that your daughter is in danger. They have a distinct lack of information about who they should actually be watching out for.
Yeah.
Tobor, as you are musing about in your cabin, you receive a written message from Commodore Pritchard. And the subject of the message is basically, in response to your recent inquiry, Pritchard sometimes has a tendency to get a little wordy with his explanations. He is not one that is known for brevity, so the shortness of this message is notable to you. It basically begins, I understand that you've been trying to get in touch with me about a particularly sensitive matter. Understand that the Dalamas Christian is under your command within my battle group, and that I will defend the Federation however I see appropriate. When there is information that I feel it is time to share with you, I will do so at that time, but I owe you no answers. Period. Commodore Pritchard. Does Tobor have any ambiguity about what this message is concerning? Because I am happy as the storyteller to clarify. I suspect you get what we're coming from?
I do, yes.
Okay. Any questions, or do you make a response back to the Commodore?
No response.
Correct answer. Okay. Narila. While you are in the science lab, Dori begins, giggling isn't the right word, but gets very excited because it seems like you are getting near the end of the scanning of the objects that were carried in the crate. She says, "Sir, Lieutenant Narila, this is really interesting, but the computer asked me something and I did a thing. I hope that it was the right thing, but I'm reporting it to you. I did a thing."
What did you do?
We've been scanning in all these artifacts, right? We have all these bits and pieces, and I swear, like, there's got to be some sort of a story or something in here that we just can't figure out. So we're scanning it in, everything, the computer's working. The computer asked if I wanted to run a holodeck simulation, including all of this information. And I said that it should start compiling that. So it's building it right now, and we'll be able to really see what's going on with these artifacts in the flesh. Oh!
Does this seem concerning to me at all?
I
asked more from a place of not
sure
being as informed as probably the rest of the group.
So some observations. Holodecks have security protocols and safety protocols in place that should prevent anything from actually harming somebody that goes into a holographic environment, right? So even if you were to open up a holographic projection of a live volcano, for example, right? Safety protocols in place prevent you from actually stepping foot into lava and expiring. That's very much a standard holodeck thing. Certain officers have the clearance enough to go ahead and override those safety protocols, but those are like the default, and they take specific action to go ahead and override. So that's the first thing. That's why you shouldn't have concern. Why you maybe would have concern is that you have no idea at this point what any of these artifacts have done, and it would be, I think, unusual for the computer to do that
without something else going on.
So Lieutenant Dori said that, hey, the computer just let me do it, and it just, maybe Dori got a little excited and asked the computer to do that instead of being asked by the computer. It would be very unusual for the computer to take that initiative to run up a holodeck program. You think that while probably a cool idea, it may not be a good idea. But it's going to be available. Does that answer your questions?
It does answer my question.
So what do you do?
It's already happening, so there's no going back, presumably. But I'm going to suggest this isn't our first route of investigation. Feels like that's a little down the road, that we have other ways we want to analyze these first.
Sure, okay. And she seems very crestfallen by this. She's like, oh, I just thought that it'd be a good idea. How often do you get to immerse yourself in a culture that's been dead for who knows how long?
I'll reassure her. We'll get there. We'll get there in time.
At least this gives you something that you would be able to bring to the senior staff meeting that has been called for X number of hours from now by the captain. So, Captain Tobor, I guess that brings it back to you for the senior staff meeting, unless there's anything else that anybody would like to do between now and the senior staff meeting.
Najjar would be digging into all of the information that he now has available on Species Epsilon and trying to use his behavior analysis and the hierarchy of needs, etc., to brainstorm and start coming up with ideas on what these things would want and how that could relate to something on this ship.
Sure. How deeply do you want to dive into this? You could take a one difficulty task to just think through it a little bit, or you could take a more difficult task or see if you can go ahead and spend momentum to kind of dive deeper. Like a one difficulty task would give you very basic, here's the thing, Here are some possible avenues, but if you really want to get some information, you could go deeper if you'd like.
The words that my captain used were the head of the spear, ruffling feathers and investigating the ship until we figure it out. So I'm going in deep.
Okay. So on a scale from 1 to 3, how deep would you like to go? Because that will be the difficulty on the task. Batshit crazy. All right. I'll give you the 3 difficulty tasks. You tell me the attribute and discipline you're going to bid, and then we'll get into how you're going to get there.
So I think he's specifically drawing on his criminal psychology and behavioral analysis and general psychology trainings, but this isn't a sentient being like he's dealt with in the past. So I think he's leaning more into his medical background than his security background, even though that's a slightly lower stat.
Yep. That's fine.
And he's exploring and open into all possibilities, so I would probably say insight.
Okay. I like it. So it'd be a difficulty 3 challenge. Yep.
What do we have?
A bunch of threat and 1 momentum.
Okay, I'll buy 1 die with momentum and 1 die with 2 threat.
Okay.
Because why not? Bold security will not help me, but I am also using the ship's computer.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. So that puts me up against a 14.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a 13, a 16, and a 1.
13, a 16, and a 1. And
I only rolled 3. I didn't roll for the computer because somebody else usually rolls for
Oh, that's right. Yep.
So I got 2 successes for the 1 for the 13 is my 3.
Yep, so that's your 3.
1 failure.
Yep.
I mean, we might get a momentum back if the computer succeeds.
Yep. What are you relying on the computer for?
Okay. So basically, I'm putting all of the information that we have in the computer, trying to come up with what a species like this would need or be interested in.
Okay. So it sounds like computer medicine. You're checking like psychological databases and stuff like that.
12, which is
12.
not a 10.
Which is not a 10. So no momentum. You at least passed your challenge, but
no momentum. Fair enough.
All right. So you're really trying to bridge together what you've determined from behavioral analysis and what the creatures could be. You're racking through it, trying to figure out like what would they be. And the conclusion that you come to is that there must be 2 different types. One, which is largely bestial in nature, has very base needs. Consume, replicate. Consume, survive, replicate. Right? The other one is a more intelligent presentation. It is tactical. It is calculating. It is controlling. So good job on a 3 difficulty task. Nicely done.
If only I had gotten that momentum to ask for more information.
Yep. Because that is a huge amount of information that you guys have never uncovered before. That's too bad you don't have more.
Yeah, based on what I saw, the ones that I fought. And Najjar can start piecing that together, combined with the behaviors that he'd seen, both while they were still in the Klingons and who spoke and who didn't.
Yep.
That it may not be a full-on drone, like hive mind situation, but there's one that does the thinking and the rest of them are goons. I wonder if what they wanted on our ship was actually the Epsilon protocols itself, so that they would know what we knew.
That is a perfectly viable assumption. You're not sure that it's true.
Of course not.
But it's certainly viable. There is nothing in your research to suggest that is not a possibility.
Here at Tabletop Journeys, we've leveled up our game and we're prepared to make your next roll legendary. We've just started a partnership with FanRoll Dice, and they have over 300 product options to choose from. Gemstone, metal, new liquid core dice, and so much more. Better yet, listeners to the Tabletop Journeys podcast can get 10% off on their orders when they follow the link below and use discount code PODCAST10. A portion of these purchases come back to us, and this is a great way for you to help support the show.
All right, so that will bring us to the end of Act number 2. Commander Tobor, your senior staff meeting.
Hey, Josh, the one thing that I would like to do between scene is I would like to give you a threat to use my well-informed talent.
I like it.
I get to ask you 2 questions about the scenario that you have presented.
Okay.
And I'm thinking about this only partially as a father. There was a theft of a highly experimental subspace weapon.
You are correct.
That means that there's a buyer.
That would be a reasonable assumption.
Yes, there should be a buyer for that.
A crime syndicate selling black market material most likely has somebody that wants to buy said black market material. That's correct.
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
The second question that I'm going to ask: there's a difference between a hit and someone calling in a professional.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I want to know what we're walking into.
Sure.
Are we looking for an individual, or are we looking for a potential louder event?
So are they going to blow up the building that she's in to go ahead and get to her?
Is this going to be precision, or are they basically just going to send a bunch of thugs out there and kill everybody that they can, and hopefully the targets will be in that body pile?
Sure. The crime syndicate at play here traditionally keeps these matters in-house and deals with thuggery and baseball bats, right? They're not likely to go ahead and blow up a city to go ahead and get to them. They're going to send their own goons, and their goons may be highly trained, but they would want everybody to know that they did it without it also being like a global affair. Is she going to get jumped by 12 people or hit by a car crossing the street? Entirely possible. And that's more likely than a sniper from 1.5 miles away sending a kill switch to a neural bomb that was planted at the base of her skull 6 weeks ago, something like that. They're not that subtle, but they're also not going to draw undue attention to themselves, because part of this is the message that they would have to send by this action, not just the action itself. Does that answer your questions?
It does. That answers the second question.
Yes.
What about the potential of a buyer?
Are you looking to see if there was a specific buyer that was expecting this thing and didn't get it, kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we'll be able to provide that information to you, but I will make a note to go ahead and figure out who that buyer is. Because when you're dealing with highly experimental, highly volatile, military-grade subspace weapon, there are not a ton of people in the universe that can afford that sort of thing, especially at black market prices. They would have to be very specific and wealthy. And again, when you looked in the dossier and saw Bragoff's name, Bragoff was not the buyer. He was definitely somebody that was working on the technology itself.
Because Bragoff should be in prison.
Bragoff should be in prison. That's correct.
We can't see across the galaxy to know what's happened in the meantime.
Who knows? Exactly, right? Firmly under lock and key with Starfleet Jag, right? Probably on some distant mining colony, forced to mine deuterium or something, so...
Because we busted his ass. That was Najar's first big case.
We don't have a name yet for the syndicate, do we?
No, we do not.
ChatGPT just gave us a suggested sci-fi crime syndicate name of Ebony Knox.
NOX?
Yeah.
I think that Lou and Nico will like that an awful lot. Okay. Now, Act 3. Commander Tobor, you have called the senior staff together.
Very good. Thank you for all treating me. We have something aboard our ship that does not belong here. And it was such of importance to the Epsilon creature that they were willing to abandon one of their birds of prey in the middle of a tense fighting scene to try and board our vessel. Mr. Sorry, what I'm going to need you to do is I'm going to need you to get into Utopia Planitia and get the original specifications for the Saber class. Additionally, I need you to track down all of the official refit specifications for the Dalamas Christian. And then, Mr. Chizilror, I'm going to need you to find the unofficial ones, especially the officer in charge of those refits that Pritchard trusted enough to do it, and then make all the evidence of it disappear. And then when we have the original specs and the supposed refit specs, Mr. Najar and his security team are going to scour every inch of this ship and confirm what is and is not true. And at the end of this project, we should hopefully find our missing piece of information as to why they were willing to negotiate and attack us in such fashion.
Commander, if I may.
Lieutenant?
Since our debriefing earlier when you first assigned me the task of trying to figure out what it is that's on our ship that they may be after, I've already started compiling data and doing a lot of behavioral analysis between what I've seen of the creatures. And I have a couple of things for you, sir. One is, I believe that there are at least 2 distinct types of parasite. One that acts following orders and more on that primal need to replicate and make sure that they spread infection. But I believe there's also a secondary type, a sergeant or commander type, if you will. Thinking about this and trying to determine what they would be interested in on this ship, clearly they've been planning some form of an invasion with the probes, correct? And deliberately calling us to them, because I personally believe that Damon Brazic was in their custody the entire time from his original distress call. What if they called the Dalamas Christian? Because somehow they knew we are one of the only ships in Starfleet outfitted with Epsilon protocols specifically to probe our defenses. I have nothing to support that beyond theory, but the Epsilon protocol also kicked in when they arrived on the ship, so perhaps there is some biological matter stored within it as well that they're after. Those are the only 2 theories I have so far.
That would make sense. They didn't bring enough bugs to infest everybody on the crew. If they wanted us, that would have been the appropriate path. Beam something aboard that we wouldn't be able to deal with that would spread the bugs. But they wanted, you're right, they definitely wanted the ship.
And your analysis does track with what it was that they dealt with Commander Remick. Some sort of larger, more intelligent, nodal parasite.
That actually, I could ask a question about something similar to that. And I put the modified tricorder on the table. Can you refresh my memory on what we did to this to make it work? What were you tracking? It was giving off something.
What we discovered was that the parasites exist in some sort of subspace flux, which makes them difficult to detect. These modified tricorders manage to filter that out so that we can find them.
So if these things are just drones, using the analogy of bees or spiders, we'll go to spiders now, they're communicating somehow. Have we thought about looking for something like a subspace web that would allow the creatures to respond back to their master, mistress, whatever we want to call this queen? They're acting in concert, are they not?
Or at least in pods, with one leading a group of lessers.
We should look into whether or not it would be possible to detect that and therefore trace it.
Possibly, but we may be getting ahead of ourselves.
Yes.
First, I want to know what's on my ship that no one bothered to tell me about. And that
Sir, I'd also like to know if we've confirmed if the detector will detect both types.
We won't know that until we point it at one.
Heard, so that is not confirmed. Thank you, sir. And he makes a couple of notes in his pad, because he just got back. He doesn't know all this information yet.
We had no reason to believe that there was a sergeant or leader among the...
If it was one, it was the one that was negotiating on Brazic's ship with me. And we unfortunately had to destroy it with extreme prejudice before it launched all of the probes.
Based on my analysis, that's part of why I did decide that there were 2 types, was that there was the one and the only one who spoke and negotiated, and the rest all simply acted and followed orders.
Yes. However, during the original incident, even the drone ones were able to exercise level of autonomy and thoughtfulness that does not necessarily indicate some direct oversight unless this thing can split its personality and focused attention into such minute sub-pieces that, well, it would be one of the greatest intellects we'd have ever discovered in the galaxy. And Mr. Tenari, after you wrap up the little project on comparing notes for design plans. I want you to start digging through the computer core and find me this Epsilon protocol. I want to know exactly what it does.
Yes, sir. I've kept files on all the modifications I've made to the ship so far, so most of this project will be essentially tacking onto that.
Yes. And have a care, if I know who installed it, it probably has its own defense mechanisms built in.
So find the secret taxonary, but don't get blown up by it.
Exactly.
That's the trick.
Isn't it always?
Sir, I know you're...
Neela, how goes, other than the little biological mishap, how is your investigation of the artifacts going?
Commander, the things are moving smoothly, aside from that small little hitch in the plans, but we are moving forward to getting everything recorded and scanned, and Lieutenant Dori has started the holodeck simulation process, so that would be ready if we choose to go in that direction.
I see. Is there anything else pertaining to the blue-eyed individuals and perhaps anything that could vaguely be associated with some sort of subspace substance? Lieutenant Tenari, what was it called that the Vulcan doctor theorized exists and you all found in the brain facility? Could Tethys be a source, also another source of this?
That subspace ore?
That subspace ore?
I suppose anything's possible, having not had
the
a chance.
moons did play merry hell with our sensor systems, did they not?
Yeah, but the away team having no reason to look for it, we don't have any scans to see if it was there.
No, I was much more interested in finding out the fate of the colonists.
Mm-hmm. It is, however, a viable hypothesis, considering that we know that the parasites are attracted to subspace anomalies.
Indeed. So, to bring Mr. Najjar up to speed, we had a lovely 3 weeks operating under Captain Schraz of the USS Faraday. And as we attempted to search for that Nausicaan ship that was seen to be coming to intercept or dock with one of the probes before the pulsar discovered it and it turned tail. We've unsuccessfully been following a standard grid search pattern to little to no avail. However, my instincts are that there is no conceivable way that it is a coincidence that Saltex 4 was picked as one of their targets, which just happens to be the obscure homeworld colony in the demilitarized zone of the executive officer of one of the ships that is leading the Epsilon project. So this is why I diverted the Dilemmas Christian to Saltac 4, and because we're going to begin at the end, attempt to discern what the parasites were planning, and work our way backwards to see if we can't pick up any preparations or groundwork they have laid amongst the planet's population. So we're going to look for them infiltrating key government facilities. I'm going to talk to the governor, and I'm sure the commander, you'll be able to liaison with your resources on the ground.
I've already received some information. And I put a data pad on the table and slide it to you.
Is it a black data pad?
No, it's not black box, no.
It's not isolated from the computer system?
Oh, yes, it is.
And has never been plugged into anything else?
I didn't even... See, that's second nature to me.
If you turn it over, you see the engraving that says Section 31 on it.
I wish I was part of that organization. That'd be fun. Maybe I am. Anyways, so Ocean will slide the pad over to you. I received a report from somebody I'm familiar with. We have the nature of the theft that is being investigated there. It is an experimental subspace weapon, which is connected to our old friend Bragath.
Oh.
The crime syndicate who arranged the theft, the Ebony Knox, it's known to me. They're not the most sophisticated group in the world, but they've got their fingers in a lot. The dossier has evidence of their involvement as well as a monitoring of the lead investigator. And from the look of the communications, it does appear that they're going to try to put a hit out on her. They have identified her normal daily patterns, and there's a likelihood that they will attempt to capitalize on them.
Mr. Najjar, if you have a time to sit with the commander and get read in on what's going on so you can deploy your assets accordingly. Mr. Chizilrer, let me get this straight. So, an experimental subspace weapon has been stolen by a syndicate that operates on a planet that was targeted by a alien parasite that is partially subspace in nature after us having found the theoretical subspace ore that can be transmuted into the primary weapon grade materials for the subspace weapon, right? Am I tracking? That's where we're at, right?
So I'm nodding and thinking it through. It does bring up a question as to whether or not Brackett's intentions were entirely capricious.
I doubt
if they're building a weapon that is based on subspace.
He even referenced some sort of consortium that he was working for. So when we get to Saltec 4, we are going to operate under the assumption, at least for the initial time being, that this crime syndicate has been compromised by the Epsilon parasites, and work our way from there.
I will then turn to the rest of the senior staff. For full disclosure, the investigator that we're talking about is my daughter. She has taken a leave from Starfleet Academy and is attending to my father, who is in his deathbed. She attends him on a daily basis at the same time every day.
Again, the timing is too much of a coincidence.
All of those pieces, when you listed them out, Captain, sound too coincidental to be coincidental.
I figured that'd be right up your alley, Mr. Najjar. Depending on how much time you have, Mr. Tanari, we may want to... I know your team is clearing out the programming that bled into the system, but if there's any way we can get the high-resolution scanners able to incorporate your parasite detecting algorithms into the ship, that would be a lot easier than having to scan the colony manually by hand, tricorder by tricorder.
Yes, if we could scale it up, that would make it a lot more efficient.
So by the time we get to Saltec, you want to be able to do a planetary scan, sir?
I would hope so. And actually, Mr. Najjar, I think if you could lead the investigation on the getting the documentation and plans, both the standard Saber class ones and our documented retrofits that the ship has undergone. That'll free up Mr. Tanari to work on the scanners.
Understood, sir. I can find the original plans and the documentation. Lacking the full engineering background, though, I assume that I would then be passing that information on to the engineering team to work on while Mr. Tanari is working on the other.
However, do your best to try and determine if the originals have been altered.
Understood. I'll do my best, sir. Detecting forgeries is something I've been trained in.
And Lieutenant Neela, if you would assist Mr. Tanari in the upgrading our sensor suite.
Sir, I do have some of the basic original design files of the Saber class in my own personal files. It's ship design's a hobby of mine. They're not the detailed ones, but they're at least somewhere to start.
We'll use them as a comparison, because essentially we're going to look at what the ship was supposed to be, how it's been modified, and then how it was actually modified.
Also, I'm thinking, I've had these files since I first heard I was being assigned to a Saber class. I got them through some public records. We could certainly compare them to what Lieutenant Najjar gets through official channels to see what differences there are between the two of those.
One more data point never hurts. Good thinking, Mr. Tanari. So anyone else have anything that we can be focusing on while we're making our way to Saltec 4?
While this has been going on, I've taken the tricorder back off the table, and I've been monkeying with it. Do these tricorders have the ability to do a passive scan, like a ping every 5 minutes?
The scans are active, but you can certainly program them to run a scan every time period as you want.
However,
So
that would probably
I could-
drain the power cell pretty quickly.
Probably would.
Every 5 minutes, just a quick ping in a 360 area, 5 feet.
The original specs were directional, so you would have to program it essentially to scan in a circle. It was not an omnidirectional scan.
No, but we could, and I'm thinking out loud about how I could, basically, I'm talking about jury rigging a tricorder. So,
Let's not jury-rig the prototype.
I assume we have more than one by now. Yes?
Still, but we're still refining.
We're still working out exactly how to get them on door sensors.
And to be fair, we technically haven't actually scanned anything successfully with them yet, other than the stasis encased remains. So we have not actually had a live sample to try and detect in the wild, as it were. So I think that's a good idea to build an omnidirectional version that can passively detect, but let's focus on making sure we completely prove that the prototype one that the lieutenants built actually works as designed.
Understood.
All right. Anything else to report from the team?
We're also working on a plan to try to tie in these scanning protocols into the transporter filter systems so that we can see if anyone beaming aboard automatically has one of these parasites in them.
That'll be good to have. All right, everyone, be about it.
Yes, sir. And Ajar stands up and heads for the door.
I pause only for a moment before leaving, just on the off chance that the commander's going to throw me something extra, but when that doesn't happen, I continue up.
So let me make sure that I understand who's doing what. Tanari, you are...
I have two assignments, trying to figure out where the Epsilon protocol is in the computer core and trying to adapt the Epsilon tricorder scans to the ship sensors.
And Najar, it was you and Ocean that are basically diving through the ship to go ahead and determine what is on the Dalamas Christian that shouldn't be, or what is not on the Dalamas Christian that should be?
Original schematics versus planned adjustments versus sketchy adjustments, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then you're also doing basically a rivet-to-rivet inspection to make sure that whatever the schematics are reporting is the ship is actually the ship.
After we've determined everything and how it should look, then it would become a physical inspection.
Right. So both of those pieces of information are going to take some time to go ahead and generate. In other words, Luaniki and I need to decide how to go ahead and answer both of your questions. But
the third piece was is that I was asked to find out who might have been engaged to perform some unauthorized, or more specifically, shadow authorized modifications, like off the record stuff.
Sure, that's an easy one to answer. And I think you know the answer already. Do you have suspicions?
If this is classic Trek, then I suspect that we're dealing with an organization like Section 31.
That is definitely a viable...
Yeah,
that's
but
definitely...
just to confirm it, I'll reach out to somebody that I know that's working in the shipyards and make a comment that if things are going really well, so forth, I may be getting my own ship soon, and I'll bet you I'm going to get my own ship first. And
playing with that threat, Josh.
So before, when you go to reach out, that contact's not available.
Oh, okay.
I'll create a complication. They're just unavailable. In fact, you receive word that they've been transferred elsewhere. They're working in a sewage facility far away from that facility. Virtually like just now. Like the transfer had just come through when you went to message them. It's the damnedest thing.
So in that pause when Ocean waited, Sabian actually would have said, start with all the officers of the former Rutledge battle group, especially the engineers. Wouldn't have surprised me it was his former chief engineer here that he trusted did make the modifications.
Excellent. Narila, what are you doing after you leave the senior staff briefing?
So I believe that I was tasked to help Tanari, and I will to some extent, but my head is a little bit in the lab, so I feel like I would probably have my hand in both pots a little bit.
Tobor, how do you run your senior staff meetings? If senior staff is in meeting, are their comm badges disabled to non-essential messages?
If anyone needs us non-essentially, it gets routed to my yeoman.
Yep. Yeah.
And then they have the discretion to interrupt.
That is perfect. So I have one quick thing to end Act 3. Narila, as you leave the conference room, the captain's yeoman says, "Excuse me, Lieutenant Narila, while you were in meeting, we received a message. One of your subordinates, a Lieutenant Dori, was looking for you. Something about a holodeck program. It didn't seem important."
I visibly raise my eyebrows, like a little surprise, thank him, and then rush to the lab.
So you rush to the lab, and as you walk in, Dora is sitting in like one of those high-top lab chairs. It's like high-top desk and everything, so her feet aren't touching the ground, and she keeps like crossing her ankles and uncrossing her ankles, and she says, "It's done. We can play it whenever you'd like." And that's the end of Act 3. Next time on Star Trek Preservations. The computer has finished compiling the holodeck program that she told you about. She seems very excited at the possibility, but she understands that, I get it, we need to wait, we're not there yet, but it's ready whenever you are.
Let's take a look and see what they put together. What can possibly go wrong? Sabian grabs his mug of tea, starts heading to the turbo lift.
On the display, a purple button appears in the lower right-hand corner of your display. And on the purple button is the Greek symbol for Epsilon.